Greetings, hero. It is I, your friendly neighborhood Rabbi John Carrier, and today we are going to be talking to a relatively new rabbi in terms of ordination date. However, she has been having an incredible impact on the Jewish world and the world at large for several years now, and we are going to discuss how being a soldier prepared her for being a rabbi to college students, how being a vegan helps her keep kosher, and how she helps us with the challenges of inclusion in the Jewish community today.
When I converted, I, was told and believed that once you have converted, you are a Jew and that's it. And nobody should ask you how you became Jew. And no one should ask you if you converted. And my experience is that most white people have missed that class.
Okay. All that, plus a cameo by the rabbi's dog right after this bass.
Welcome to the Jewcurious Show, where learning about Judaism and getting to know Jewish people can help you live a life of meaning, joy, human connection, and personal growth. And now your host, Rabbi John Carrier.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Joey Weissenberg and the Hadar Ensemble. And thank you, hero, for tuning in to the Jewcurious Show. If you are listening to this show for the first time, welcome! We're glad to have you in our community here. If I may make a suggestion to optimize your experience, I recommend that you hit the subscribe button. This is a handy-dandy little button on just about any podcasting platform you'd use for listening to a podcast. And by clicking that button now, just in case we get interrupted, say by a dog or something, it happens. Then you can always go back and find where you were on this show, and you will automatically receive all the shows that we make in the future. And once you've taken care of that important business, you can just sit back, put the phone in your pocket, put it in your glove compartment out of reach, because you are not going to want to miss a moment of this important conversation with Rabbi Sandra Lawson. If, however, this is not your first time here, then you've probably noticed we've been on a bit of a break. A hiatus, if you will, maybe a seventh inning stretch? No, because we are nowhere near the end of this game, hero. But I confess that I have been radio silent for a while now. I want to apologize that. However, it's because I have been building something deep down in my laboratory for mad rabbinical science. For the last 6 weeks, I've been working on something. It's been a labor of love that has culminated in the emergence of a dream come true, and that is the Jewcurious School. For several years now, I'll say going back to about the midpoint of my rabbinical studies when I was learning at the conservative yeshiva in Jerusalem, I hatched a plot. I birthed an idea, meaning there was a lot of pain involved and heavy breathing. I think that metaphor is now officially hyperextended. But I came up with this notion that I really wanted to build a school. And that was a particular kind of school of Jewish studies that was open to all kinds of people, whether they were Jewish or, as one of my students said this week, Jewish, or simply Jewcurious. Anybody who has respect and regard for the Jewish tradition, wants to learn more about it. I want them to have access to the same kinds of learning that I've had access to as a rabbinical student and now as a rabbi for the last 4.5 years. I've been reminded of the teaching of one of my great teachers, Rabbi Elliot Dorff, who says that Judaism is an exoteric tradition, not an esoteric one. An esoteric tradition is a religion or body of knowledge in which there are secrets, and only the initiated have access to those secrets. An exoteric tradition, on the other hand, is an open book. There are no secrets. Anybody can delve into it. And Judaism is this open book. However, that book is often in Hebrew or in Aramaic or in Judeo-Arabic or Yiddish, and it does take some learning to access some of the ideas, but I wanted to lower the barriers of entry as much as possible. And now that we have tools like the internet, like online learning platforms, like live streaming over the internet, or I can hold the same kind of class that I used to only be able to have in a synagogue or in a college classroom, I can now do with people around the world instantaneously via live streaming technologies. And with tools like Sefaria, this profound online library of sacred Jewish texts, I can share those texts that used to only appear in the Beit Midrash, in the yeshiva. I can share those with students around the world. And so for the last 6 weeks, I have been putting together a platform for doing just that. If you are a Jewcurious person, and that could mean you're learning about Judaism for the purpose of conversion, or you're just learning as a seeker, as somebody who is interested in religious traditions, not quite sure yet which is the right one for you, but you are open to learning. Or if you've been Jewish your whole life, but maybe you haven't been in a synagogue, or you haven't been in a synagogue since you were bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah, and for one reason or another, you feel compelled to return to the well today. Or if you are fully committed to another religious tradition like Christianity or Islam, but you want to understand better the Jewish roots of your own faith. Whatever piques your curiosity about Judaism, about Jewish people, this school is open to you. And without going on too much about it, because I really want to get to this conversation with Rabbi Sandra today, I'm just going to point you to a guide that I prepared for you called The 3 Things Jewcurious People Need to Upgrade Your Jewish Learning. And that can be found at jewcurious.show/3 things. That's the word 3 followed by the word things, no space. That's Jewcurious, however you spell it. It's on the cover of this podcast, .show, SHOW/3 things. That's the word 3 spelled out THREETHINGS, 3 things, one word, no spaces. So check out that guide, see what I'm talking about, and you will also find a way to get connected with the Jewcurious School if that's something you're ready for. And just to say, it is ready for you. It's been open for a couple of weeks now. We've had several beta tester students get in there and kick the tires and help me work the bugs out so that the experience would be as great as it could be for you if you want to enroll today. So that's why you may not have heard from me in a while. Been working hard on that. It was a real labor of love, just connecting my love for the Jewish text with my affinity for, HTML scripting, if you will. It was kind of a hobby and a little bit of a profession back in the day. Merging those things to build a school where everyone, everywhere can access the kind of Jewish wisdom and traditions that have changed my life. And I believe, if you're open to it, can change yours for the better. So check that out, but check that out later, because right now, I would like to introduce you to Rabbi Sandra Lawson. Rabbi Sandra is a soldier, a sociologist, a vegan powerlifter, and now a rabbi and chaplain at Elon University. Now, what may surprise some people who've heard her name before is that she is kind of a brand new rabbi. She was only ordained this past summer. However, I've been learning Torah from her for years because she has been documenting her process as a rabbinical student for the last several years, has been teaching profound Torah online through Facebook, through Twitter, very active on Twitter, connecting people with Jewish sources, connecting people with wisdom, connecting people with each other, well before getting the official rabbi title. And now she's putting all that to work for the students at Elon University and continues to share her wisdom with people around the country, around the world. And today it is my honor to share her wisdom with you, hero. Let's get into it. Coming to the microphone, I am proud to introduce my colleague, my fellow Rabbi Without Borders, Rabbi Sandra Lawson. Sandra, welcome to the Jewcurious Show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I've been following your work for some time now, and I know other people have as well. And some of those people may be surprised that you are actually kind of brand new at being a rabbi as far as like the job title goes. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I was ordained in June from the Reconstructions Rabbinical College, or Reconstructing Judaism. And I have been using social media as a rabbinical student for most of my time, all of my time as a rabbinical student. So I may be well known to a lot of people, but I am definitely a newly minted rabbi.
Right. And I think that's a testament to the idea that you don't have to be a rabbi to teach Torah.
Right.
Like, I'm not knocking rabbis. Some of my best friends are rabbis. As I've said before, dentists know a lot of dentists, but you can teach Torah wherever you are in your learning process. As long as you know something more than, the next person, it's a mitzvah to share that bit of Torah with them.
Yeah.
And I've been watching you on social media for years now and just totally crushing it. And now that you are an ordained rabbi, what do you feel has changed? Like, when ordination was conferred, does it feel different? Do you feel like you're teaching in a different way?
Interesting. Really good question. Yeah. I mean, the sort of transition, you probably know this, but the transition from, living my life as a rabbinical student for some people, that's, 4 or 5 or 5 or 6 years. And for me, it was 7. And now I'm actually, living the dream. I'm actually doing the work that I set out to do. And it's really cool and amazing. By using social media to teach, that's just me in front of my computer, or me, having a conversation with somebody on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And I think in a lot of ways, rabbinical school prepared me for a lot of things, and rabbinical school prepared me in a lot of ways to be a rabbi, and in a lot of ways it didn't, because the cool thing about, I think, being a rabbi is that we are constantly learning. And I have good strategies. I have good instincts. And the job that I have that I love now, I didn't learn in school.
Okay.
I didn't learn any of it in school. I mean, I'm the great person when people ask me, rabbinic or Jewish questions, but, I work as a chaplain, and I'm constantly confronted with student issues that I'm, surprised by, worried by, excited by. And, when I try some things I learned in school, like if they don't work, what do I do? And so, it's just sort of like learning how to engage young people who are excited about Judaism, and also trying to figure out how to engage people who aren't as excited about Judaism.
I want to
also, I've only been doing this job for since August 1st.
Okay. Oh, just wait.
Yeah.
Should try to say that in the least patronizing way possible. But that's just reflecting my own experience, because I remember that moment of starting in July or August, and somewhere, I don't know, mid-high holidays, just having this, maybe I've told the story before here, where my wife comes to say goodnight. I'm sitting in my easy chair, and it's like 10:30. That's where I did my work. And I'm on my laptop. It's 10:30 at night. I've got 2 hours of work ahead of me at least. And my wife is coming to say goodnight. And I just had this moment of, gosh, I'm exhausted. But I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah.
But it really prompted me to ask the question, like, did seminary prepare me for this job, in the sense of, like, I couldn't imagine. I look back and say, I could not have imagined the work of the rabbi accurately on any single day of rabbinical school. Yeah. At no point in 5 years did I have any idea what I was getting.
Yeah. And in rabbinical school, you get to play a rabbi.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah.
Yeah. And at the same time, though, I have to ask myself the next question, which is, was that a waste of time and student loan money? And I had to say no, because I felt like it gave me the Torah to teach. Yeah. And then, but there's no preparation for, jumping over the Jordan there.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like how I would always think about like kids in camp, thinking, okay, what's it going to be like to kiss somebody someday? And everybody has a theory as they're talking around the bunk, what that's going to be like. And they're certain of what it's going to be like, but there's no substitution for experience. So what was the biggest surprise for you, do you think? Like, what was the biggest, like, oh man, I was not prepared for this, or wow, this is way better than I thought it was going to be?
So I think both to answer those questions, it was high holidays. So, I've been to a lot of high holiday services, as a student, as a rabbinical student, as a Jew in the pew, even as a volunteer. But when I started my job at Elon, I think I was on campus for about 3 weeks before the students came. And a week after the students were there was high holidays. And we don't have a large budget. And so it was just me, me preparing Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Students usually do a lot of volunteer, but they just got on campus. They were just trying to figure out their schedule. So I had to do a lot of plugging in of students and didn't get the opportunity to really work with the students around what the things that they could do. And so I knew that I would make it through. And I did feel like my training prepared me for what I needed to learn. But I was overwhelmed. And at the same time, it was the most exciting thing I've done since I've been here. And I learned so much. And there's something about when you are thrown into the fire, even though it is not my favorite way to learn, it is the best way to learn because you have to do it and you have to create a space, a spiritual space for people, during, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And it was fun. I called a lot of my colleagues. But it was all those things.
So I know from your bio that you have not always been a rabbi or a rabbinical student. You've done a few different jobs in your life. What's the least rabbinic job you've had that's prepared you for the best for being a rabbi?
I mean, all of them, but I think probably the military. The military was my first career. Mm-hmm. And I was in college, and I had been in college for like 3 years, and it wasn't working for me. And so I decided to join the military, and the military gave me focus. It helped me to if I want something, if I have to help me to create goals, if there's something I want to do, it gave me strategies on how to make that happen. It also, I was in the military during the time period with a lot of the students that I work with. Mm-hmm. It also taught me leadership. And when I say that, I think a lot of people have stereotypes about the military and leading, but the biggest gift that I got from the military that's helping me with the students that I work with now is to take a step back. And so the training that I got in the military sort of taught me when you are new and you're in an environment that's been working for a long time and you're the new person, to not necessarily jump in and make changes right away, unless that's what's needed. Mm-hmm. And then there's a process of micromanaging. But it taught me to step back, let me see the culture, let me see how this operates, and then slowly over time as I need to make changes. And that has been a really good gift for me because I probably would have done a lot of damage if I would have walked in and all of a sudden started making changes right away. And I think that the people that I work with are very appreciative of my stepping back. I think sometimes they have probably wanted me to step a little bit more forward, but I've told them, like, this is my style. Let me figure out the culture here. Because the culture on every campus is different, but the culture on my campus is really unique. Not to say other campuses aren't unique, but it's probably the military.
So what's the campus that you're on right now? You're on Elon University, yes?
Yeah. So it's in North Carolina, and it is in a very small town. And even though it's in North Carolina, the majority of the students come from New York and New Jersey and probably Pennsylvania too. And a smaller group of students come from the South and other areas I had a coffee with a student a few weeks ago, or actually yesterday, who is from this area because her dad is a professor at the college. Mm-hmm. And people often treat her differently when they find out that she's from the area, and not necessarily treating her in a good way because though they're in the school in the South, they still have their Southern, the biases about being
Sure.
in the South.
Oh my goodness, it's a townie.
Yeah, basically, even though her parents are well educated.
I know.
So it's a very liberal bubble, and it's a small private liberal arts college. Most of the students that come to the college, and I hope this is the correct information. So President Book is the president of my college. If this is wrong, I apologize. Okay. But they don't have a large endowment or whatever. So most of the students that come are paying full tuition. There's not a lot of financial aid. So that means these students are coming to Elon with a lot of privilege, but they're also getting a very good grounding in liberal education and in all kinds of ways. And like liberal education, and pulling from humanities and arts, but also liberal, meaning broad thinking and how to view the world.
Now, what do you think is the unique challenge of being a rabbi to college kids? And I say kids, and I mean, people go to college at all sorts of ages, but sort of your modal population. What do you think are the unique challenges that they face that a rabbi can help with?
I think so. Like I deal a lot these days with students that are homesick. And the messages that they're getting are just stay busy. And I feel like, when I offer a non-judgmental presence and also offer empathy and can say what they're experiencing. Yeah, it sucks. Like, I think I had a conversation with a young lady a couple of weeks ago, and I think I may have been the first person that told her that, yeah, it sucks. Homesickness sucks. And she just seemed so relieved because everyone else was like, you make it through. And I was acknowledging, that what she was feeling was valid and real. And I'm also surprised by the level of homesickness. Like I've had students talk to me who were thinking about transferring because they're so homesick. And I don't know if that's a reflection of the larger student body. And I do think that, most of those students will probably overcome it. But just listening, I'm not trying to solve their problems. I'm just, we're sitting there drinking coffee or we're sitting in my office and I'm just listening to them. And I think they appreciate it. And that's where I spent a lot of time as a chaplain in school. So I think that's helped me out a lot with the students.
One of my favorite moments in the Talmud is, it's a unit on problem solving, sort of. It's where I think Brachot 5b-ish, like Brachot, Rabbi Yochanan comes in and he's healing sick friends. And he comes to a guy and he says, "Are you sick? And do you want to be sick?" It gets into a whole other story.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying your sickness for the sake of receiving a larger eternal reward? And the rabbi says, "Nope." If you had a pill for this, you could have my eternal reward. I'll trade it for you. And so Rabbi Yochanan, just like uses his magic healing powers. He has like this glowing hand and touches him. It's like E.T. really. And they get up. And so, he heals somebody comes in and heals him magically. And then the third person he goes to, he's talking him through this issue that he's having. He sees his friends crying. He's like, "Are you crying because of this? Are you crying because of this? Are you crying because of this?" And it's like, solve, which is what we want to do. Is a lot of us have the instinct to kind of jump into the fray and have to check that. Because at the end, his friend says, "Look, I'm just sad because we all die. And you, my friend, are going to die. And there's no fixing that."
Yeah.
And it says that Rabbi Yochanan says, "That's a good reason to cry." He sits down next to him and they cry together. And,
that's great.
And after a while, it just, I forget the Aramaic phrase, but it's basically like sometime later, he got up and healed his friend.
Okay.
But I never, before you started talking about it, I never thought about it that way, that as he's going through all these reasons for which his friend might be crying, he's trying to solve it. He's like, "Don't cry. You think you're sad? I'm sadder. You think you don't study enough Torah. Not everybody gets to, take a salt tablet, walk it off, rub some dirt on it, and go forward."
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, the only thing that really fixes the situation is that listening.
Yeah.
And that being present and that mirroring. And so I think that's a profound lesson, not just for Hillel rabbis, but for all rabbis out there, especially new rabbis who, I don't know if any, people can't see it on the podcast. If you could, that would be weird. But I have a Superman t-shirt on right now. as we're talking.
Yeah.
And that's what we feel like. Like I said to a couple of people, that feeling between ordination and taking the job as a rabbi. Like I get ordained in May, the temple's fiscal year starts in July, and here I am sitting on my hands, and I felt like it felt like being Superman with a cape and no metropolis.
Yes.
Like I've got all these magic powers that I've got to go help people with and nothing to do. Right. I guess I'll just write home to Krypton or something. Oh, it's too soon. Let me ask you this. Now, in North Carolina, where Elon University is this a hotbed of Jewish activity?
Not where I am. No. I mean, there are like in Greensboro, Durham, Raleigh. I definitely know about Greensboro, but I know I'm imagining there's thriving Jewish communities. But in Elon, North Carolina, which used to be part of Burlington, North Carolina, and is part of Alamance County, which is a small community, probably on the poorer side. I'm not really sure. I'm still learning, and most of what I'm learning, I'm hearing from people who aren't actually from here. But no, it's not. It is the Jewish community, the Jewish student population at Elon is growing very fast. The students make up anywhere from 10 to 12 to 13% of the student body. I use those numbers because I've heard different things on different numbers on different days. So let's just say 10 to 12%. So on a campus of 6,000 to 7,000 students, that's 600 to 700 students. And the university has taken notice of that. And, I can't speak for the other religious communities, but the Jewish community is definitely growing. But we have a thriving religious community. Like there's an imam on campus and other people, other chaplains.
So a lot of folks talking about God, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Are there particular challenges, do you think, for a rabbi who is not close to other rabbis geographically? It's not like New York or LA where, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a rabbi.
Right.
And don't do that, by the way. Don't swing a dead cat with rabbis. We hate that.
I can't imagine if, before FaceTime, before cell phones, before Zoom, before Facebook and all the things that we have now, it would probably feel really, really isolating. But I feel fortunate enough because whenever I do have a question, there's usually a rabbi that I can connect with. And it's really funny because I had a question and around like fundraising, and I wanted to run my question by a rabbi in my movement that I knew, and she just happened to reach out to me. A rabbi that I knew happened to reach out to me to check in to see how I was doing, and I was like, "Oh, this is perfect. Let me ask you the question." And so she helped me to. She answered the question, also gave me guidance on how to work with my team around this issue. And so I feel isolated in some ways. It would be nice to, on Shabbat, just walk into a synagogue somewhere or JCC or something. But any Jewish life that I have in this community has to be created by me and my students.
I want to jump on something that you said. I want to take advantage of a moment to ask a rabbi a question. And I think you're the perfect person to ask this because you've been doing so much over the years on social media and connecting with people and being very intentional about serving people who don't necessarily have access to a Jewish community, whether that's geographic, psychological, what have you, because I have a lot of people asking me this question, and I'm going to punt it to you. How can somebody who is, say, learning about Judaism, but doesn't have a synagogue within a 3-hour drive? What's the best way for that person to connect, or what kind of advice would you have for them?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've had a few of those conversations with people either on Facebook or Twitter or something. And I think that's one of the cool things, I guess, when you make yourself available and approachable online. And what I have said to people is that I don't personally believe that you can do Judaism in isolation. I think you need to be part of a community. How that happens, that can be the challenging part. I think the cool thing as we are moving into the sort of technology world that we're living in is that people are creating online communities. I'm not sure what they look like, but if people can find a way to daven, to be in community with people who are not in close proximity to them, they should try to figure that out. The challenge, I think, is also when people are in the conversion process or people want to convert. And that's a little harder because you have to find, a rabbi or a bet din or whatever. You need to be in close proximity to people. And so I've had conversations with people where I've asked them, like, what is the closest Jewish community near you? And often, at least the people I've talked to, we're talking like maybe 30 miles, maybe 40 miles, maybe an hour. Mm-hmm. And I've encouraged them to reach out to one of those rabbis and see what can be done. But I also think sometimes with people who don't know a lot about Judaism, that I think they're learning to understand that you need to be in community for Judaism to really work.
Right. We don't have a monastic tradition very much for a good reason. I mean, you get into like there's some weird communities back in like Philo's time.
Yes.
Other than that, for the most part, you need to be close to another Jewish person or people to really get the most out of it. And so the question that I have that I'm still wrestling with is, what can you do by yourself? And what and how far does that, and how far can that take you before you need to go to the next level? Yeah. And I'm not in the business of telling people like, okay, you can't be Jewish unless you sell your house, move to Los Angeles or New York or the Five Towns or whatever. And I say you can kind of set that as an aspiration. Like, you don't know what life has in store for you. You may say, I can't go to Shabbat, or just like Shabbat, like I can't do Shabbos because I have this job that I need to live that makes me work on Saturdays. Right. So I'm just not going to think about Shabbos anymore. It's like, well, no, you think about Shabbos and you do what you can. And then someday a door might open. Be ready to walk through that door, or someday transfer may come through in your job or whatever you're doing. And then boom, when you're choosing a new neighborhood, choose the Jewish neighborhood. Choose it, look for kosher restaurants in ways that you hadn't before, or grocery stores and things like that. Is that you can do these things in isolation in a kind of preparation for that. And I'll say this is kind of selfishly because I do a lot of online stuff. I believe strongly, and I'll go to the mat on this one. Online community is community. Yeah. There are some disadvantages. It's hard to get in a mikveh virtually. Yes.
Somebody's going to figure that out at some point.
I think you would just electrocute yourself, really. So don't do that. This I'll just put a little disclaimer on this episode. Do not, if you are Jewish and part of an online community, do not take your computer in the mikveh. It will not work out well for you or your computer. And they have to shut down the mikveh. It gets very awkward for everybody else scheduled that day. So I want to ask, on behalf of my audience, some advice from you. First off, is there anything, or let me say this differently, what's the most important thing that you think people who aren't Jewish should know about Judaism?
So I think who aren't Jewish. Judaism, I think, as someone who converted into this tradition, Judaism, I think, is exciting. I think it's fun. And I think that I think that we as Jews have not really done a really good job of like sharing how great it is. And your question, even though your question was about people who aren't Jewish, I keep going back in my mind to people who are Jewish, because I think, and I just, even though you didn't ask me this, because I deal with a lot of students who are coming from a place where they only know Judaism one way. And they believe often that there is a tradition. And then I'm like, there's traditions. And I forgot, I am not completely in isolation, because one of the professors here on campus is a rabbi. He's not serving in that role. He's teaching Jewish studies. But he is also a source that I can talk to, which has been really great for me. But yeah, go ahead.
Say you're some kid from Philly, and you know the Judaism that you grew up with in your house, in your synagogue that you lived in, you were part of your whole life, and you're like, this is Jewish. And then that kid goes to Elon University, and there are Jewish kids from Philly, from New York, from New Jersey, from Israel, from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, or whatever. And this kid is now immersed in a diverse Jewish community.
Right.
How do they cope? Or like, what's when they come to Rabbi Sandra and say, that's not Jewish?
Yeah. So most of them are like, this is when they see something different. So it's interesting you were saying that, because I was recently talking to a student who I think is from Puerto Rico, which is part of the United States. I know people don't think it is, but and she grew up in a conservative or traditional community. Never had a male rabbi. All the leadership positions were men. And I don't think she knew that women could be rabbis. I might be wrong about that. She comes to Elon, and that is not the culture there. And she's embraced it. Like, she's just like, wow. For other students, we have conversations around like, well, that doesn't feel Jewish to me. Or they're like, that's not Jewish. I'm like, well, actually it is. Let me tell you why. Or they only want me to do what they grew up with. And I'm like, I don't know what you grew up with. I wasn't in your synagogue. Help me out. Like, tell me what you like. But also the cool thing is that my students are really open. And also the cool thing is, like, the first year students, I don't know if they all have to, or maybe this is Jewish studies students, but they're taking a class called Jewish Traditions. And so the other rabbi that I mentioned is wonderful. His name is Dr. Rabbi Jeffrey Clausen, is teaching them about how diverse Judaism has always been. And so when we have these conversations about like the diversity or how Judaism is always evolving, they're getting that message from me, and they're also getting that same message from someone else. And so they're really open to it. But people like what they grew up with, and it's kind of hard because I can't provide them what they grew up with because I just don't know. We can learn the songs together, we can learn the tunes together, and try to create an environment that works for them. But yeah, it's just I'm just kind of surprised that in this day and age that people still think that there was just like, or use language that sounds like there's just one Jewish tradition. And there's a lot of Jews running around thinking there's only one Jewish tradition, and none of them are doing the same thing.
and I tell them differently, but they tend to lack the curiosity that, that would make them listen to the show. Anyway, so like if you're listening to the show and people who are like that, tell your friends that there's more than one way. There's more than one way to be Jewish, and there's more than one Jewish tradition. And anyone who tells you otherwise has a great opportunity to learn from our history.
Yeah. And there's also this, which you probably know about, this level of authenticity. Like, I'm just a cultural Jew. I'm like, oh, you're a Jew. I don't believe in God. That's okay. And then we have a conversation about what it means to be a Jew. To be a Jew has nothing to do about believing in God. You either have a Jewish parent or you converted in. That's what makes you Jewish. I don't know Hebrew, or I don't know these things. So I'm trying to create an environment where Judaism is accessible to them, and also at the same time validating who they are at this moment is very Jewish. If they want to be. If they don't want to be Jewish, that's a different conversation.
Right. Or it might be the end of a conversation.
Yeah.
Or just like, my door is open. My Starbucks card is all charged up.
Yeah. Also, we have a lot of students. So, Elon, we have a house. And we're very fortunate that we have a house. A lot of the other chaplains don't have one. But we have a Hillel house, which it's the students' house. They have access to it almost like not 24/7, but they have access to it to like midnight. And there's food. There's, they can study, they can watch TV. And it's so attractive that we have a lot of students who come to the house, use the house, who aren't Jewish. And that's kind of cool, actually. And also they can do their laundry for free. It's pretty cool.
I think you've hit on the formula for attracting college students. In conversation is food and free laundry.
Yeah.
No more going to the grocery store for quarters on laundry day.
Yeah, and we have wonderful parents who help stock our fridge, and so that students can come to the house and have a home cooked meal or cook their own food if they want to.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. Let's say somebody is listening to this podcast. I hope people are listening to this podcast. That would be a nice thing. They're listening to the podcast. They're driving in their car. They're on their way to a Beit Din and a mikvah.
Okay.
They're going to today's the day. They're going to a place where there's a mikvah. They're sitting down with three rabbis who are going to give them a little quiz. That's not how that works. Three rabbis are going to have a conversation with them and ascertain their sincerity about joining the Jewish family. And then, God willing, that goes well. The person gets into the mikvah, and bada bing, they're Jewish. And I said bada bing because you don't yada yada the mikvah. That person listening in their car right now, if you could say one thing to them, what would it be?
About going to the mikvah?
Or about joining our family? About wherever their headspace is on their way to that appointment.
So I think what I'm going to say is probably what I hope and dream that everyone has this kind of experience, even though that might not be. And I can say more about that. I just say it because I know I've had conversations with people who the Beit Din part of their conversion experience was not a pleasant experience. But that any Beit Din that I've been on or plan to supervise or whatever in the future should be an organic, beautiful experience, because by the time that person comes to us, they have been studying with their rabbi and working with their rabbi. And so at that stage, it should just be, tell me about you. Like, tell me about yourself. What makes you tick? Why is this path? Why is this the path that you've chosen? And then, ask organic questions around what they have talked about or what they have written about. And then to sort of, after that process, that the mikvah is this, sort of wonderful, beautiful, you strip, for people who don't know, you take off all your clothes, your jewelry, your makeup, whatever is on your body that would interfere between you and the water. And you immerse yourself and you go in one thing, however you go in, and then you come out a Jew. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was a really beautiful experience, more so than I had expected it to be. I kind of looked at it as just sort of a formality, but it really was a transformative experience. And that has a lot to do with the rabbis that were on my Beit Din.
I can imagine that on the one hand, somebody can make it up as this huge thing and then maybe doesn't have the experience that they expect. Mm-hmm. More likely or more often what I've seen is people who, again, see this as, okay, this is a box I have to check. Mm-hmm. Okay, I get in the water naked. That's kind of weird, but it's what they do. So as long as we have lunch plans afterwards, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they're not prepared for how moved they are by the experience. Mm-hmm. And wonderful. I serve in a Beit Din occasionally. Wonderful rabbis there. That Rabbi Cohen often says, mm-hmm. just remember, tears are okay. Yeah. Because it can be an overwhelming experience. Yeah. And nothing you feel in that moment, I just wanted to say to people, is inappropriate.
Yeah.
In that it can be a powerful experience that you're not expecting. And so whatever emotion you're feeling at that moment, that's between you and the water, and it's totally okay.
Yeah.
So after somebody gets out of the water, they're Jewish. Now what? What's kind of the charge that you would give them, or what's the one thing that they should know to get started as a member of this family?
I think it depends largely on the community. And I can only speak from my experience and some of the Beit Dins that I've been on. I've been fortunate enough to know the people, and I think that we are not a tradition where, okay, you're Jewish and that's it. It is a very active participatory tradition, and so you can't passively participate. You're expected to be involved. And that's the good thing. I mean, if I had converted and was just a Jew in the pew, if that, I would not be a rabbi today. I'm a rabbi because I was asked to take on more and more responsibility, and I loved it. And I wanted to learn more about this tradition that I inherited. And so that, I think that's one thing that I want people to know. And I say that because I've had conversations with people who are curious about Judaism or in the process of Judaism. And I think that they may not understand that it is an active. That's part of the commandment, is to be active in our tradition.
Right. I got the jacket, but I don't have to go to the meetings if I don't want to, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You're going to be asked to do things.
Yeah. If you get the most out of it if you wear the jacket, go to the meetings and go on the rides.
Yeah.
I just made us a biker club.
That's it. Yeah.
I don't know how the other bikers are going to feel about that. I've read some of your writing, and I haven't heard you speak on this, but I've seen that you speak on inclusion in Jewish communities. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Like, what's your main message to get across to people? Let's say somebody out there is organizing a Jewish community, or there's a rabbi or a lay leader. What's the first thing they should know if they want to make their place not just look more inclusive, but actually be more inclusive?
So I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to take a step back probably. One of the reasons that I talk so much about being inclusive is that the community that I joined when I converted to Judaism was a community that was founded by a group of Jews who didn't feel welcomed in Jewish spaces. And it was a gay-founded or LGBT-founded synagogue, or mostly L and G founded synagogue. And at some point in time in their history, they had to make a choice about whether to let straight folks in and to whether to let intermarried people in. And they realized, that they were discriminated against, and it would be wrong for them to discriminate against others. So gay-founded synagogues in this country were the first synagogues to openly really start to welcome, probably I'm making an assumption here, but openly welcome interfaith couples, meaning that they didn't just want the Jew to come, they really embraced the whole entire family. And these synagogues are also really attractive still to LGBT people. They're very attractive to Jews of color, and they're very attractive to couples who are intermarried, a Jew and a non-Jew, not necessarily a Jew and from another religious tradition.
Right.
And so when I converted, I, was told and believed that once you have converted, you are a Jew, and that's it. And nobody should ask you how you became Jew. No one should ask you if you converted. And my experience is that most white people have missed that class.
Okay.
No, my experience is
in my defense as a white person, I didn't even know there was a class. But I'm interested.
Yeah. So, and everybody knows, I mean, not everybody, but most of the Jews that I know, they know that you're not supposed to ask people if they've converted. But I get asked that all the time. I get asked that by parents today, and they have no problems with it. And sometimes when I'm in spaces where I'm a little freer, there's not a power dynamic, or it's not a, parent, somebody that I work with, whatever, I will throw it back at them. So when did you convert? What, me? Why are you asking? That's wrong. I'm like, well, no.
You're not allowed to ask people that.
Yeah. So I came from this really open, radically welcoming space that wasn't perfect. They still had problems. They still had challenges. And then I have struggled or other people have been struggling with the diversity that I bring to the table. And so as a rabbinical student and now as a rabbi, I want to make it easier for people who come after me, who may be queer, or maybe brown or black, or, converted to Judaism. And so when I'm teaching classes, I bring in these texts that show how radically inclusive Judaism is and has always been.
So let me ask you this. What is your favorite text that someone would say, oh, that's a text, that's a traditional text. I didn't expect to hear about inclusion from that. What's your favorite source on that?
Yeah. So the one that I have a few, but the one that comes to mind right now, and tomorrow may not be my favorite, but right now it is. In the Torah, there's a text that uses the term Erev Rav to describe the multitude of people who left Egypt. And so the text of the Bible, it's like it describes the diversity of the people that left. And so that text from the Torah shows that the people who left Israel were a diverse group of people. And then by the time they get to Mount Sinai, they're now Jews.
Right. Just to clarify, it's people who left Egypt.
Yeah. Yeah. So sorry. Yes.
So, and just to translate, Erev Rav meaning mixed multitude. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. That's how it gets translated in this text. Sorry. He was bugging me.
That's quite all right.
It's my dog for people who can't. If you put that in, I don't know. He's not interested now that I've picked him up. So.
Right. No, I heard a dog collar wriggling in the background, and everyone is welcome on this show.
Yeah.
I don't currently do bark mitzvahs, but everyone is welcome on the show.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also another text that I wish I had the text in front of me, but it's a Talmud text, and it talks about how it uses the translation uses the term defect, and I can't remember the Hebrew, but how you shouldn't point out something that's different in someone else, because that's a reflection on you or something. I'm screwing this up. I don't have the text.
No, that's all right. But that's also one of my favorite, borderline sarcastic, snarky texts. It says, don't fret over the mote in your neighbor's eye until you take care of the beam in your own.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't worry about their small problems, dude, until you solve your own big problems.
Yeah. And then there's one, the text that I also, when I always come back to is V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, that you are commanded to love your neighbor as yourself. And, when I always either chant that or sing that when I'm teaching classes around inclusivity.
Mm-hmm. And how hard is that? How hard is it? No, how hard? Chanting is very hard if you can't sing. How hard is it, let me ask, to love your neighbor as yourself?
Well, so it's interesting because the rabbis in our tradition have been talking about that for a long time, and there's a lot of commentary and text on what that actually means. I think that ultimately you have to love yourself first, and then how you treat other people is a reflection on how you feel about yourself. But I think anytime that we can remind ourselves that I should love you because you're my neighbor, you're my brother, you're my sister, you are me, we are all created in the image of God, that we, as many times as we can tell ourselves that, I think that helps us move. I'd like to believe that helps us move through the world a little better.
Now, in addition to being a rabbi, I'll say a social media maven. Maven, that's a Jewish word.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
and a soldier, and a singer.
I use that one loosely. I don't know. Okay. I'm still having a hard time embracing that one.
I'll say musician.
Yeah.
Because I know you're an amazing musician. I've heard you play.
Oh, thank you. I have a hard time with that one too.
You are also, if I can share this, a vegan power lifter.
Yeah. Sure. Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, how does that work?
I eat plants.
Okay. Ask a stupid question. And B, I'm just going to walk that one back. And B, what does that do for your rabbinate?
Oh, all of that, or?
Yeah. No, I'll focus on the vegan powerlifter part.
Yeah. So what I often say to people, so I became a vegan about a decade ago. I really wanted to find a better way of eating, really. I just had gotten to a point where I wasn't competing as an athlete anymore. I had finished a graduate program, and I wanted to cleanse my palate for 30 days. And so I decided to just try a plant-based diet where I really ate, lots of salads and beans and nuts and seeds and things like that. Not a lot of processed food. And also because veganism at the time was not as sexy as it is now. Everybody wants to be a vegan now. Every time I go to Twitter, some celebrity is now a vegan. That was not the case about 10 years ago.
So you were into it before it was cool.
Yeah.
That's how I felt when the first Batman movie came out. And I'm like, guys, I've been in Batman for years. Yes. And the Doors movie when everybody got
yeah. And so, but after the 30 days, I felt great. And so I wanted to learn more about being a vegan. And in order to stay with being a vegan for 30 days, I started reading a lot of books, seeing some documentaries. And then I was really curious about what Judaism says about being a vegan. And I had just finished a graduate program in sociology with a focus on environmental justice and environmental racism. And I found this documentary, I think it's called Sacred Duty, and it's a Jewish film about Jewish values in the environment. And what I learned a decade ago when I saw this film was that the impact on the environment, or being a vegan diet has a much lesser impact on the environment. Now, that's not news today for a lot of people, but it was news to me 10 years ago, that like factory farming and all those things, how horrible that is for the environment. And the more I started to embrace this sort of lifestyle, I also realized that I could actually keep kosher. I hadn't really entertained the idea of keeping kosher before. And then once I stopped eating meat was, as a kosher person, or a kosher diet was not appealing to me. And I started to learn more about, how veganism is in line with, is a kosher diet, basically, right. Or it is. And so my Jewish values have helped me to stay a vegan.
Okay, let me. And I'm just going to ask this to be annoying. So, if you want to keep kosher, is veganism like kind of cheating? I'm going to say that in a different way. Are there values of kashrut that you carry into veganism? Meaning, for me, and I'm just going to project here. For me, kashrut is about making choices from available options, right? I can choose to eat this cut of meat or not. I can, I have to make a choice between whether I'm going to eat milk or meat at a particular meal, right. Things like that. And this is my ignorance, but I feel like veganism kind of takes those choices away, right? Takes those options off the table. And were I to become a vegan, not only would I miss steak, but I would also, I don't know if I'd miss making those distinctions, but I would feel like that sort of part of my spiritual discipline would go out the window. Am I reading this totally wrong?
No, I think that's fine. I think that's one way of looking at it. I think if I had, when I became a vegan, I was Jewish, but I hadn't thought about the Jewish part of it. For me, it was just like, I want to feel better, or I want to, I don't like how I feel, and I want to try to, do a cleanse, but I wanted to stop eating the crap that I was eating, and this seemed like a good way. And so for me, like, when I think about, like, this also a few years later was the stories that came out about the agribusinesses in Iowa.
Right. This was the kosher. This is specifically the kosher meat processing places that had all sorts of problems.
Yeah. And so,
were you talking about like the kosher businesses, or just in general how horrible they were?
Well, no, just that one in particular. And so the farm, wherever this was in Iowa, I think it was Iowa.
Yeah. Postville.
And I learned, I hadn't thought about, the concept of kosher slaughter. And I probably had a perspective that was really, I know it was naive, that, the kosher butcher or the whatever the term is, the rabbi who does it, would just go find an animal, there'd be an animal and say a blessing and, slaughter the cow the way it's supposed to be slaughtered. And what I saw from these films was not that. It was horrible. And nothing to me watching this film seemed Jewish to me. There was nothing in it that felt Jewish. And then on top of that, the labor practices, how this particular factory farm was treating its labor. And that, that also had a lot to do with Like, I don't want any part of this business that slaughters animals this way. And then also by the time I got to rabbinical school, I started writing papers and reflecting on, when the kosher laws were created, I don't believe that God had in mind slaughterhouses.
Right. Or it had in mind perhaps family farms.
Right.
where you're harvesting one animal at a time to eat for the next week or month.
Right. Yeah.
Not here's a factory situation where we're going to feed all the Jews in Brooklyn by killing 1 million animals today.
Right. Yeah.
And how does that, and what gets lost in translation there? Yeah. And so I have to immediately eat my words about veganism being a spiritual dodge, because it's clear that you've put this same thought that some people at best put into kashrut and put it into decisions about how you're eating, even though like the milk and meat thing is off the table. There's still, I think, the essence of making those distinctions, B'Shem Shemayim, like in the name of heaven. So that's amazing. What's something you're working on right now that you want people to know about?
I'm really trying to be the best rabbi that I can be at the university where I work. And on a personal note, I have hired a really young, wonderful musician who's a graduate of Elon University. And I could tell he's a graduate of the university because he's so warm and he's like maybe 22 and, he's trying to get me to embody being a singer, embody being a musician and not be so shy about it. He's getting me to open up. And I didn't just hire him to teach me guitar. I wanted to be a better performer. And so my own personal growth, I'm working with this young man and he's excited. I'm excited that he's teaching me and he's texting his mom, the rabbi's coming today. He's like, I get to work with the rabbi. So it's just really kind of cool. And I'm glad he's not a student anymore. That would just be weird. Right. So for my own personal growth, that's what I'm working on. And I'm also in the process of trying to figure out how to write a book. Okay. Yeah.
I'll say it's at once way easier than you think it's going to be, and occasionally way, way harder.
That's right, because you've written a book. I need to read it.
We'll start with it. Everybody needs to read it.
Yeah.
See, this is the difference between you and me. I'm going to stand up here and say everybody needs to read my book. You are just a picture of humility in that it's I wouldn't call myself a singer. I'm working with this kid who's going to help me out. And I've heard you play, and you're being very humble right now, which is a testament to your character and totally wrong. So everybody needs to check out the work that Rabbi Sandra is doing. If somebody wants to get in touch with you to talk about something we talked about today, to talk about inclusion, to talk about your journey, to talk about how, talk about their own journey, what's the best way for somebody to get in touch with you?
So they can find me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Rabbi Sandra. I have a website that's sandralawson.com. And if you want to call me my office, I haven't been there long enough to know my office number by heart. But if you go on the elon.edu's website, you can find me and contact me that way.
All right. I'm going to hook everybody up with all that in the show notes. Rabbi Sandra Lawson, this has been a delightful conversation.
Thank you.
It was a treat to learn from you, to learn with you, to meet your dog. And I hope we can do this again sometime real soon.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Hero, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Jewcurious Show. I know Rabbi Sandra and I had a lot of fun making this show, having this conversation. You got a few laughs in there, as well as talking about some serious and important stuff. And if you want to dig deeper on anything that we've talked about, I commend your attention to the show notes. The show notes to this episode are at jewcurious.show/episode 16. That is the word episode, the number 16. That's a 1 followed by a 6. And if you go to jewcurious.show episode 16, you will see Rabbi Sandra's bio. You will see all the ways to connect with her via social media And in addition, you will see a link to a resource I mentioned earlier. That is the guide, 3 Things Jewcurious People Need to Upgrade Your Jewish Learning. And you can click the button in the show notes, or you could just go to jewcurious.show/3 things. That's the word 3 followed by the word things, no space. Get to know what these 3 things are and find out a little bit more about the Jewcurious School, which is now open for enrollment. I would personally love to see your face and hear your voice at our next live weekly Torah or Parshat Hashavua class. That means portion of the week. We get together live for about an hour every week and discuss it, in addition to some self-study courses that are on there and my personal favorite feature of the Jewcurious School, and that is the community forum, where Jewcurious people of all kinds are getting together, are chatting, are asking questions, answering questions, offering support, getting support. However you came to be learning about Judaism, there is a place for you at this school, and I would love to see you there. One last thing, one last word of apology about our hiatus. We are now back in full effect. I don't know if you want to call this season 2, but we are just going to keep rolling along. Got another great interview lined up for next week and for the weeks after that. So until then, hero, peace.
Thanks for listening to the Jewcurious Show at www.jewcurious.show.